Mauritu, te Māori ora, ki te katoa, hauie, huie, tāikie.
Thank you. Seated. Right, we have no apologies. Is there any conflicts of interest? No conflicts of interest. So we've got two speakers for a public forum. Once they speak, you'll work out what they're going to be talking about, but it's to do with car parking at the PGA. Just so if you need a clue. So Chris, if you would like to, you've got 10 minutes, you'll get a bell on 9 and you'll get a double bell on 10. Thank you.
E te iwi kaina e ngā matawaka tēnā. Can you hear me okay, or do I need to sit down with the mic?
Best to use the mic for the live streaming.
Okay, all right. Look, thank you for the opportunity to come and talk very quickly, and I don't think we'll need the full 10 minutes, but we'll see. We're here to present a bit around the Peregu Green Arena. This has been a successful project which we've partnered with Napier City Council and also Hastings on. As you probably know, at the start, EIT was pretty significant contribution into that project. I think it was around $3 million EIT put up. And as a way of actually us doing something together in a collaborative way rather than everyone trying to do their own thing. And it enabled us all to be able to sort of put together something that was more going to meet the region's needs than if we'd all tried to do something separately. So we're committed to this project. We think the opportunity to expand this project is one that's well worth pursuing, actually. So I just wanted to touch base on a couple of things around it. Oops, it's gone. Yeah. So we support the project and the additional court space to meet Hawke's Bay regional needs. There's clearly a need within the region for more court space, and we think PGA is a good location to be able to doing that. And we will make some land available to enable that project to occur, because as you know, we hold some of that land. But we're suggesting it's with some right-of-way provisions for both parties. And Dick, who's the capital planner, I'll be able to talk more specifically to that. That's for some technical reasons. As you're probably aware, we're now part of a national network of institutions, and so we don't have quite the same freedom to make decisions that we might have had prior to the 1st of April in terms of our land and assets. And so this is probably the most elegant way and speedy way for us to be able to make land available through that mechanism. One of the challenges we do have is we do have significant issues around parking. And if you're down that end of Napier, then you'll probably be aware of that, actually, and particularly around the starts of semesters. It gets quite pressured down that end. Prior to PGA being established, students were using around about 280 parks along Gloucester Street and the reserve land opposite the campus. And that gave them about an average walking distance of about 250 metres. The resource consent that was established at the time around the PGA was to provide 280 car park replacements on the PGA and the reserve land, and that of course took some of the pressure off Gloucester Street and the like around that area. And there was an average walking distance as a result of that of about 400 metres for people to walk to the campus or the centre of campus. With the proposed new builds, there's a couple options, as you know. Was the one over the stop bank, which gives us about an average walking distance of about 350 metres to the campus centre, and whereas the option behind the new court development on the reserve land gives us, quite a considerably longer walking distance in terms of some 600 metres to the campus centre. Just to give you a bit of a sense, we have obviously a pretty busy campus with a lot of students using the campus, and over 600 or more than 600 of our students would be over the age of 40. We actually have more than 275 students who are over the age of 50. And we don't think it's a particularly practical solution to put the car parking over half a kilometre away from the centre of our campus. And we also don't think it's particularly not really in the spirit of the original intent of the resource consent to replace curbside parking with something that's that sort of distance away. And actually, there's just also the practical component, as you well know, and people have a bit of an expectation in Hawke's Bay to be able to park quite close to where they want to, whatever shop they want to be in. And the reality is, we want to incentivise people to use the car park other than find somewhere else. And so we actually, to be honest, when someone came up with the solution of the parking over the edge of the stop bank, we thought this was a eminently elegant solution, actually, it meant that it wasn't impacting on the community reserve green space, and that land wasn't being taken up with asphalt as such. The one thing that we would take a bit of a difference of a view on, from what I gather has come from the regional council, was the flooding around that area, which I think they have it as a 1 in 5 years. We monitor this area very carefully because our stormwater infrastructure is reliant on what happens with the river Tutaikuri. And you know, we're very confident that there's been no flooding in that particular area for 25 years because our stormwater system goes out into the river, and actually we have to keep a very close eye on the floodgates and what's happening around floods. And so I know there is climate change, and we've had that announced last night, and we're going to have a different future than what we've had in the past. But I think we think that this is quite an elegant use of land that occasionally will be under pressure, possibly around flooding. But this sort of solution is being used in other cities, and car parking is something that you can actually clear with enough advance warning to be able to clear away. And the other key thing too is it provides a parking proximity to the campus that we hope will incentivise usage, i.e. people park there, rather than this, if I could say, some of the aberrant parking activity that happens along that street, and people can be pretty creative about finding a place to put their car actually, and not very safe places, and they'll go for somewhere as close as what they can get. So if we're putting something over half a kilometre away from the campus, it'll be the last thing that's ever used, rather than the first. So we don't. So our sense is that this suggestion around over the stop bank we thought was a very elegant solution of land that was there available. It had the risk of flooding on rare occasions. It didn't mean that the green parkland space of the reserve land was taken up with asphalt and car parking, and it was actually also much closer to our campus, so it was within the spirit of the original resource consents that we took on together when we went into partnership around the PGA. So yeah, that's the essence of my presentation, and you're welcome to ask any questions. And we can, try. And actually, I should say that the board, the EIT board, I'm not sure if Ross is here. Actually, Ross was going to come, one of our board members. The board are keen to support this project and keen to see the further court space made available into the region of Hawke's Bay. And well done on securing some funding to be able to do that. So we'd like to see it progress, but we also are very mindful of the needs that we have and the pressure that already exists with the issue around parking and the original resource consents that were given for this project at the start of our partnership. So, kia ora, thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Just before Dick Hilton is from PGA too. He's here to assist with any questions. Do we have any questions?
He's actually with EIT, I should say.
EIT, sorry.
He's the capital planner at EIT.
Yeah. Right, well, I'm a road out. Councillor Bogue.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that. In terms of the options that we're looking at today, which one are you thinking is the best one, as far as you're concerned?
I don't have the papers you have, but it's the one where the parking is over the other side of the stop bank.
Yeah. Over the stop bank, yes. On the Hawke's Bay Regional Council land. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, guys. Now, You weren't as overt as this in your presentation, and just following on from your kind of preferred option, is it fair to say that EIT's contribution and agreement to the project is actually contingent on that location? You're not supportive of that further away option and may not support the project if it was that far away? Is that what I'm reading between the lines?
Well, that's certainly what the board, when they considered this, was that they approved it on the basis that that parking option was the one that was explored, because it was the most elegant solution.
Perfect, thank you.
Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, and this may not be a question to our guests, but somebody can probably hopefully help me out here. Who ends up owning the car park and is therefore responsible for its ongoing maintenance?
So maybe our next speaker may be able to answer that. With the best one.
I can answer it now.
Or you can answer it when you're up
The
there.
representation totally Pettigrew Green Arena's responsibility. If it's flooded, it will be totally Pettigrew Green's responsibility, and we have to do the lot.
Thank you.
And just, I think, just to make clear, the partnership arrangement we have with Pettigrew Green Arena is that they are able to make use of our parking, for events and the like, and weekends and evenings. And likewise, we have those allocation of parks during the day for our students. So that was part of the agreement, to try and sort of make use of the combined parking resource that would exist between the two.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Tapani.
A couple of other questions. They're really down the track, assuming that the over the stop bank option progresses. In your conversations with the people who use the car park, staff and students, were there any concerns around visibility of their vehicles on the other side of that stop bank? I'm just conscious of what activity happens along that stop bank that we can't see, and if we're going to put 450 cars there, while flooding is addressed under the terms in the paper, I'm wondering where liability sits around damage to vehicles in an area that has low visibility. Is that a concern?
It's probably better for Dick or Craig to answer that.
On all of our parking, even within campus, it's the responsibility of the car owner where they park their cars. I mean, we have issues from time to time of theft of vehicles even during the day. We've got cameras and stuff to help, but they're not monitoring at the time. They're really only evidential, so it really is owner's discretion wherever the car parks are, and there have been issues even at the car parks at PGA as well. So it's just part of normality, I suppose, when parking your car.
Oh, and my follow-on question, if I may.
Yes.
So when the original conditions were negotiated around the consent for the 280 car parks, was it?
Yes.
How long ago was that consent started, and is there still a shortfall of 280, or is that number smaller or larger?
No, there is enough car parks to meet the resource consent that was approved at the time for the 280 car parks, and as Chris alluded to before, part of the consent, instead of building more and more car parks for events for PGA, EIT gave their consent that PGA could use our car parks for large gatherings. And that's a joint partnership that's actually set in concrete as far as the resource consent approval.
And it's been my observation that that relationship is working well.
Yes.
Thank you. I've got a geotechnical question. Won't be for our guests though.
Do you want to save that to the presentation after the speakers? Okay, thank you. Is there any other questions? Okay, thanks very much for your presentation, Chris and Dick. And yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just
What's that?
can I talk while
No, go up there.
Get an extra
Start
2
the
minutes.
clock when you're in your seat.
I was just going to say the Regional Council have massive early warning systems for floods upstream. So the chances of a car being stuck there will be more about the student not being there that day at EIT or not listening. So there's still a chance.
Can you speak into the speaker, please, Craig?
Okay. Right. See if this works. Does this have a pointer?
Red dot.
Thingy.
The clock started, you know, eh?
Thank you. Right.
He hasn't sat down. That's the rule.
Have you sat down yet?
She's an old horse.
There you go.
This is the single biggest investment ever made in Napier in the well-being and future of our youth. 90% of our users, regular users, are under 19.
It is so awesome for particularly young people to come together in one massive venue, be able to have fun with their friends and for their family to all be able to watch from a great viewing area.
Basketball participation is growing rapidly over the last few years. I mean, you'd all know that.
Futsal has become a lot more popular.
Volleyball is a growing sport.
At the moment it's pretty limited with training venues and what nights you can play. All the sports want to go indoors.
We're at a stage where we are going to have to potentially have some teams that can't play because we've just run out of space and we can't fit them in.
Having a facility that has 11 courts would be amazing.
In Hawke's Bay, indoor courts especially, are going to increase the opportunities for our young ones to play and the conditions. As we can see, it's pretty windy today, so our young ones' games are often cancelled with the rain, even in Term 4, and having an indoor experience for all levels of the players will be amazing.
It means that parents don't have to go to multiple venues for their kids to play. It's all could be on one night.
For me, it would really benefit because we could have tournaments inside. Our games won't get cancelled, so we will be able to play every week and not have weeks off.
The expansion project will allow us to ensure that we can meet the demands, but also have growth opportunities for the future.
To have 11 more courts, you'll get that cross-pollination between sports, we'll get more boys playing alongside the girls. We're going to create that real community atmosphere with going indoors.
You know, this new stadium is well worth its weight in gold. I think it'd be very beneficial for the Hawke's Bay.
I support the Pettigrew expansion project. I want to see more places to play futsal and a lot more teams playing.
I'm all for the expansion of the Pettigrew Green Arena.
We support the Pettigrew Green Arena expansion.
I fully support the PGA expansion project. It's something we need to do now. It is becoming a real struggle, so please get behind it. Thank you.
When we started this project, it was more about the community. The community needs more sports space, and that's been showing up for probably 5 years. The research that was done by Sports Hawke's Bay identified a massive shortage, and we've taken a long time to get to where we are today. But as a result of scale, there's a huge upside. The upside is that we will attract so many more regional and national tournaments, so many more bed nights for Napier. The economic benefit is huge. The biggest tournament we have now is an under-13 regional basketball tournament. The location, I'd have to say they got that right. With the Wakatio route and the expressway, we're reasonably close to Hastings. Flaxmere, I think, is 12 minutes away. Havelock North's 15. Hey, it could take you 10 to 15 minutes to get there from here. So it's a very central, perfectly located location, which is important for the future of the sport because we need car parking. It does a fantastic fit for those parts of the Local Government Act that you guys are responsible for in providing social, economic, environment and cultural, recognising that the two major sports we have as users, basketball and volleyball, 80% of the participants are Maori or Pacifica. So it really ticks that box in a massive way. and what's happened to growth in these sports, it's really impacted on things. When this was built, basketball as a participation sport was relatively small. The Hawks were probably part of the big user of the facility, and sports have grown just massively, and that you can expect that to continue to grow. And you put them all in one venue, and the health and safety that these sports can impose will be significantly increased as well. The biggest investment ever into the well-being of youth in Napier. And you're to be applauded for the funds that you are committing to the project. All major users of the sports are team sports, not individual sports. That plays a huge part in social benefit. Parents getting together with other parents, parents organising things. It's just so good for the well-being, and we can have capacity for events. So it's an additional benefit, but we can't do it without car parks. So the project's going to start next year in about March, and we've got huge requirements by the government in terms of meeting to keep our $6.4 million grant going. We finish in 2022. Our first full year will be 2023. And then 2026, we've got the capacity and financial resources by our projections to put on another 2 basketball courts without the need to come to you for a massive amount of money. We can't do that if the car park's at the back, because we'll have to build more car parking. We've got a huge amount of money from the government, really, but we weren't shovel ready. We've had lots of stressful nights trying to meet deadlines to get the shovel ready. We have to submit resource consent before Christmas. We've got to get resource consent by February, March, so we can start the build as per required with our $6.4 million government funding. We've agreed on a potential construction company, but we've got to meet our next deadline, which is a contract and resource consent lodging. We've got 2 choices. Well, actually, for us, we've only got 1 choice. At the back, or the preferred car park location over the stop bank. At the back, as you said, as Chris alluded to, is just too far away. We also, when we say too far away, we expect entrance to still be further up. We don't want people wandering through the back and have an uncontrolled entrance, so people would have to walk up to the front of the stadium here to gain entrance. This is our long-term plan. Our long-term plan has us continuing to go out the back. We believe we could probably put another 8 basketball courts out the back, and instead of waiting the number of years we've had to wait, we'll be able to do it within sort of time frames of 4 to 5 years by expanding gradually. That wall there will be movable, and we'll move to the next stage each time. So our long-term plans are significantly restricted if we put car parking at the back. I'll just comment on the council officers' paper that they've submitted with rankings. It takes no account of our long-term plans, and it takes little account of the requirement to get 400 square metres off EIT. And although Chris hasn't made this as clear, Dick's made it clear to me, it's a showstopper if we go out the back. It's a showstopper for the future of the development, and it's a showstopper for EIT. I just thought I'd share this one with you. Gives you an example of the change in traffic flows. It's just been released yesterday, so it hasn't had much internal debate yet, but we'll increase the entrance to EIT for Napier, or for PGA, and an additional entrance, not an exit, as you're coming down to the left-hand road. We're not building a car park that's a piece of concrete. We're building a car park that'll be eco-friendly. It'll have a lot more security in terms of any other car park that the regional council have at the riverbank, and they've got 5 of them within 5 minutes of PGA over the riverbank. It's not going to be a burnout zone like Guppy Road. It's going to be, we hope, a place that ends up on, hey, this is a good place to visit. It's protected, it's got video surveillance on it, the lights will be solar, and it'll be eco-friendly. It's not a massive concrete block. There'll be plenty of green space in between, and there'll be parts of the car park that are actually have grass growing through it that aren't the higher use areas. I repeat, we're not building a concrete block. Will enhance the natural environment. We've set aside 2.5 million to do this, and it's a huge amount of money. To future-proof the place, we've got to put the car park over the stop bank. That's it.
Thank you. Is there any questions?
Got me with child friendly.
Thank you. Well, that's great. Thanks, Craig.
I have got one
Oh,
question.
sorry, Councillor Tapani.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I thought the staff might be able to answer this question, but actually, Craig, you may know this, given you've provided some detail around the thinking for the car park on the other side of the boom. Were there any geotechnical studies done on the area being highlighted for the park?
No, but we'd have to do for the car park. No, but we'd have to do that.
Okay.
Part of resource consent, I believe.
Councillor Crystal.
Just looking at the plan, so people park their car there. How do they get? Do they walk down the road to the Pettigrew Green Arena? How do they get there?
I'll show you. We're going to build a walkway there.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay, so on our original plans, that was a lot closer to the building. We've moved it slightly so they can walk in through there. Okay, Subway would like us to force them all through there, but we're not.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Just following on from that, the flow of foot traffic to EIT, where is that expected?
It currently just rushes across the road, and we don't expect to change that. It's part of the traffic review. It's not a pedestrian crossing. They have a safe area further down here. Most students don't even use that. They just rush across the road.
Okay, so there's no footpath along there?
Oh, there's a footpath, sorry. There's a footpath along there. Okay.
Oh, what about from the new road that you're putting in from the...
Yeah, there's a footpath already along here. There'll be that will continue. Okay. So from that point of view, there's also a bike track that comes through here and out there. So the bike track would continue. I don't think council would get us away.
What she's asking is the footpath from the car park to the footpath.
Oh, okay. That is expected to go over the bank as well. Okay. Where it will be, I'm not actually sure yet.
But there will be a footpath.
Yes.
Councillor Mawson.
Just in relation to the entrance and exit to the car park, appreciating it's a stop bank, what we can't see is the height and so forth. I'm just thinking health and safety. You would have thought this through, but it can't be seen in this diagram here. You've got a footpath, a track already going through. I'm just wondering about height. I mean, obviously you wouldn't want to go straight over the bank and have a car right in your face.
No, that's...
Does it sort of slope up to that, or how does that work?
We really haven't got to that detail, but it's a pretty logical question. I can't see them getting it wrong.
Yep.
Okay.
There'll be a resource consent requirement, which should cover those sort of things.
Yeah.
One final question, if I may.
Yeah, Councillor Tapani.
Craig, thank you for highlighting what you saw as some perhaps areas of the report that could have been strengthened. One part for me was the absence of HBRC as a key party in the conversations to date. So it didn't come out clearly in the report. Where does HBRC sit within, because we've got EIT, we've got the Pettigrew Green Arena. Where are HBRC?
I'll let Glenn. It was a joint report,
Okay.
so I'll let Glenn answer that.
Okay.
No, that's it. Okay, Glenn will answer it at his presentation, but it was very much a joint report, and Hawke's Bay Regional Council met yesterday to consider the report in the absence of our input, and they've made the decision to put the decision off to the 16th while they get your feedback.
16th of
December,
okay.
The last day for us to get resource consent in, just about.
Okay, any other questions? Beautiful, thanks Craig.
Okay.
Very good. Is there any announcements by the Mayor?
I would just like to take the opportunity to say congratulations to the Magpies and the Hawke's Bay Rugby Union for taking out the championship title last Friday evening, or was it Saturday evening? It was Friday, wasn't it? All the days are rolling into one at the moment. A huge effort, a well-deserved win, so congratulations from myself and Council.
Okay, I have no announcements. Is there any minor matters? No? Do I have a confirmation of minutes, please, for the 22nd of October? Moved by Councillor Bogue, seconded by Councillor Mawson. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Right, we move on to agenda item 1, which is the Pettigrew Green Arena.
Okay, before I go through just a bit of a summary of the paper, I'd just really like to acknowledge Craig Waterhouse and Dan, who's here as well from PGA, for the work that they've put in and for their presentation today, and also Chris Collins and Dick Hilton from EIT for coming and presenting to you and really providing some important contextual information. We also have Chris Dolly here from Hawke's Bay Regional Council, who has been a partner in developing this technical assessment and the paper as well.
Mike, a bit closer, please.
Better? Okay. Okay, so as you're aware and as Craig has gone through, PGA have plans to expand their facility to solve an issue that Napier has with the lack of indoor court space for organised sports primarily. So we're talking basketball, volleyball, futsal. We have committed $4.1 million towards the project, and in August the government granted $6.4 million from the COVID Response and Recovery Fund for the project. So that money is fantastic and enables the project to proceed, but it also has a few, it's really compressed the project in terms of timeframes, in terms of trying to get this project underway to meet the government deadlines for starting construction. Okay, so to expand, for the expanded facility, obviously we need a whole bunch more car parks. There's going to be a hang of a lot more people using the facility. There are 3 realistic options for providing these car parks. You've gone through this before, but there's the Riverside Reserve, which is NCC land at the back of the facility. We've got the over the stop bank option, which is riverbank land, which HBRC are the guardians of, and sort of a hybrid of the two. So those were the 3 options that were assessed in the technical assessment. So what is required from here is really agreement between NCC and HBRC in terms of where the car parking is to go, and providing clear direction to PGA and their board to enable the project to keep going and to get resource consent and all that sort of stuff. So as I sort of alluded to before, this has been a parallel process. The whole development of the technical assessment and this paper is essentially following the same path through Hawke's Bay Regional Council and Napier City Council. So the technical assessments that you've seen, the paper and the findings have all been a partnership, I suppose, with HBRC. The technical assessment really was quite close, and it doesn't really separate any of the options. There are pros and cons of either one, and it really came to the point where it doesn't provide a clear determination as to which way to go, and really it's a political decision and discussion to be elevated up through the councils of both organisations. So the assessment itself was designed to evaluate pros and cons across a defined criteria. It wasn't intended to make the decision for us. So all of the aspects were weighted equally. So each party may have different weightings in terms of what they think is important and not so important, but we decided to weight everything equally because each, Hawke's Bay Regional Council have different strategic objectives than what Napier City Council does, so we decided to keep it, weighted equally. So the technical assessment identifies the Riverside Park Reserve, the Napier City Council Reserve, as marginally more favourable, and as I said, however, it provides little in the way of separation. While the stop bank option is the best option for servicing the arena itself, as well as better servicing the EIT students and more effectively supporting future development, it does carry a greater risk of flooding, potentially causing loss or damage to parked vehicles. As Craig mentioned before, Pettigrew Green Arena has undertaken to be responsible for all asset renewal costs. So if the car park is damaged in any way, then the cost won't be borne by Hawke's Bay Regional Council or by Napier City Council. It's completely PGA's responsibility to repair and conduct any maintenance and renewals that are required. Probably the most significant factor to me is the EIT, who are a foundational partner of PGA. As you've heard from Chris, they have an agreement in place for providing car parking. It's a reciprocal arrangement, so when PGA has a big event, they are able to draw on the car parking of EIT to provide car parking for all the people that are turning up there. And it is the position of EIT, of the governance board of EIT, as Chris said, that it's potentially a showstopper for the project full stop if we can't get the little sliver of land at the top which enables the project to go ahead as designed. So the recommendations for the paper were for noting the assessment of the three options, getting rid of the hybrid option, which really was the worst of both worlds, so it wasn't really an option to proceed with. Consider the two remaining options and develop a preferred position, and then commence, I suppose, discussions or negotiations with Hawke's Bay Regional Council to come to an aligned position and providing clear direction to PGA. Since this paper was written and submitted, there's been a couple of recent developments. The design and build contract, which PGA have been working on, the tender, is very close to being there, so they're almost ticked off one of the key milestones in their process. There was a flood a couple of weeks ago. I think you guys are probably aware of it, but it's also meant that the Rodney Green Centennial Event Centre, which has got 3 basketball courts, is out of action for, at this stage, an unknown period of time. But it could be anywhere between 12 and 18 months, which puts further pressure on a really already constrained space in terms of providing indoor courts provision, and meaning that kids can run around and get their activity, get their sporting activity in. And as was alluded to before, Hawke's Bay Regional Council had their initial meeting yesterday. It's going to the council again on the 16th, and as consistent with their double debate process. And I think hopefully between the end of this meeting and the start of their meeting, that there could be some activity between the two parties and hopefully coming to some sort of arrangement as to where we believe the car parking should go. That's my summary.
Okay, any questions? Councillor Bowden.
Yes, just through you. I have a procedural question. Mr Waterhouse said that the consent deadline was the 16th of December. We're double debating this today, and perhaps I could ask through you, Mr Chair, and our next council meeting is the 17th. So would it be feasible for us to have a decision of council on this if we choose that option 2?
No, I'll ask in a minute.
The 16th is our date in terms of deadline that we set to submit resource consent. If you wanted another day, then that's the way it is. We need resource consent by end of February to be able to start the build. We give resource consent to the guys too late, don't we? So it's going to be a big ask anyway.
Thank you. So we do have that extension, and I think it should be double debated. So yeah, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Tapani.
Greetings, Glenn. Not sure if you have the answers to this question, and feel free to fob it off to one of our more qualified colleagues. But I'm conscious of Redcliffe Transfer Station, which is a few hundred metres upstream from this location. I'm also aware that Council's been informed that the stability of the ground underneath that facility is causing ongoing concerns, and that we may need to look at the long-term viability of that site. So by extension, what do we know about the proposed car park and the geotechnical results underneath that car park? Are they likely, how are they entering into a space of confidence when we're concerned around Redcliffe?
Yeah, okay. Thanks for the question, Councillor Tapani. Through you, Mr Chair. That is a little bit outside my lane. I'm not a geotechnical expert by any means. I will potentially... John Kingsford has been working alongside this, but he's not here today.
Might that be something that could come back at the second stage?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, it will be part of the resource consent process.
If we note that, and we can answer that at the. Or are you in the position to? No.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm happy with that.
Okay. Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Glenn. Just a question, just to get straight in my mind, the process. The next step. So if at this council meeting we were to take your officer's recommendation and say develop a preferred position at this meeting, what further discussion is needed? Just in terms of resolution point D.
Yeah, well, I mean, ideally, the perfect way to proceed is that Hawke's Bay Regional Council and Napier City Council come with the same preferred option. So that would be a relatively easy process to to get together and agree that yes, this is what we want to do. If the positions that both councils come to are different, then that's where it starts to get a little bit complex. So I mean, it's very much political discussions, and officers will be doing what we can to facilitate that, but. Yeah, as was mentioned at the Hawke's Bay Regional Council meeting, there is a political element above the the officer technical assessment, which needs to be considered. So really, we're saying, up to you guys. We'll help where we can.
Councillor Crown, and then the Mayor.
Thank you, through the Chair. So just for clarification, Glenn, the land that we're talking about is actually owned by Hawke's Bay Regional Council?
The term that Chris used is guardians or kaitiaki of the land. So it's not their land as such. They're not landlords similar to we are to the reserve land.
Right, okay, thank you. And I suppose, as continuation of the Deputy Mayor's question, did they, or yesterday in the HBRC meeting, did they allude to a preferred position at all?
Not really. There was a lot of questions, there was a lot of discussion and debate, but no, there wasn't an allusion to a preferred position. The officers, I think, have a position, but it's a councillor decision. So, yeah, no, there was no real indication from yesterday.
And just one final question. Have the governance teams, have councillors from both HBRC and NCC, I don't remember having any contact with them around this kaupapa. Have they... No back and forth yet?
Not as yet, no. Okay. No, this is the opportunity, I suppose, to start that process where the officers have done their piece of work, and now that needs to happen.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Through the Chair, just in terms of the overall timeframes for this project, if the resource consent isn't issued in the timeframe required, and we can't hit the start construction dates, what are the risks there?
I will probably have to put that to Craig. Are you able to answer that? I mean, from my limited understanding, the funding agreement stipulates a construction commencement date. Whether that date is met or not, I'm not sure of the consequences on that. But I mean, I guess the worst case scenario is that the $6.4 million has to go back. Yeah, would you add anything to that, Craig, through the Chair?
And get us an extension through that method. Staff at MB who are controlling the project are very clear that deadlines are deadlines. The first deadline we missed by a
Thank you.
So just further question, have you had an indication from council officers around the level of confidence of the resource consent being processed in the timeframes required?
I'll let Rodney Howard, our planner, project planner, answer that.
Yeah, it's tight. It's very
Do you
tight.
want to go up to the seat and talk to the speaker because it's live streamed? Thank you.
Yes, so timeframes, as it's been noted already, are very tight. We are tracking considerably well with the resource consent. There's a meeting happening right now, which we'll get an update after this from all the technical inputs. The real tough one has been the traffic, not so much just the parking, but how we can enter and exit this site with the uplift of cars. So we've got a solution now that we believe is going to be passed by Heritage New Zealand, because we are working with the heritage site on the corner there. So yeah, look, all I can say is we are pushing extremely hard to get this over the line for you guys. We are meeting with the planning team at Napier City Council. We've had a pre-app meeting. We've got another meeting coming up next week, so they're informed. And yeah, we've got to keep pushing. And if we do miss the deadline, I think Craig is right. We will need to leverage off yourself, Kirsten, and see if there is a way to save 6.4 million. So
Thank you.
Does that answer it?
So prior to the final decision, you are doing a lot of work getting ready to go.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, we've had to keep going. We couldn't wait. There's a lot of work around the visual impact, around acoustic, and things like that needs to be assessed, and that's for the building itself. So those all needed to be actioned along with the archaeological side. So yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Tapani.
First questions to you, Mr. Chair. The live stream from Hawke's Bay Regional Council's meeting yesterday set aside, I'm conscious that Chris Dolly is in the room.
Yes.
I would like to ask your viewpoint on whether we can direct some questions directly to Chris to provide some insight around HBRC's position on this matter.
I'm happy for him to speak if he's happy. Yeah.
I guess the questions I'll be asking you, Chris, from my point of view were, what was your impression of the meeting held yesterday? Also, I understand that HBRC is undergoing a significant schedule work around the flood control scheme, and that might align well around projected activity. And it was mentioned by Craig Waterhouse that there are 5 other locations where HBRC has access provided on the other side of the berms. What is the thinking around HBRC if this should go ahead, and what are the expectations so far, given that we're still collecting quite a bit of data?
Yeah. Okay.
Just for the first question, Chris, I'd say it's probably difficult for you to answer, and giving your impressions of a feeling at a meeting.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah, that might be difficult.
It is difficult, and look, our process was a double debate process. We took the paper to the Corporate and Strategic Committee for an initial discussion, and then invite the proponents for a further discussion at the full council. So that was our process, and we're midway through that process, and council have not yet formed a firm view about support of either option. It was simply a discussion, and they have asked for some additional information about how the project is supported or otherwise by our values. So we'll be doing that work over the next week to add to the paper that goes to the council on the 16th, in addition to hearing from both EIT and the PGA. In terms of the other car parks that we do have probably 20 odd car parks around our river network. They are quite different in scale and purpose and construction to this, up to 600 paved surface car park. Our other car parks are really targeted at recreational users of the rivers, are generally fairly small and are made of a shingle type base, so any damage that occurs through flooding, etc., is relatively simple and cheap to fix. It's also a good opportunity to point out that the plans presented, and we've provided this feedback already, are not constructible in the manner that they are shown. You've seen the car park effectively go right up to the cycle trail. That land is in fact a stop bank on an angle, and so it's physically impossible to construct it that way. We've also advised that the Regional Council ourselves are in receipt of significant funds through the IRG COVID Recovery Fund. So we have $20 million, some of which will be invested into the Taradale Stop Bank, and that's a priority area for us. This particular stop bank has a significant consequence if it fails because of its proximity to the Taradale built environment. And we will actually be doing work on this stop bank in the probably third quarter of next year. So as part of that, we'll be doing a lot of geotechnical investigations, and we're happy to obviously share that information. But effectively, we are building the stop bank wider. So the crest, instead of being 4 metres, will be 8 metres, which will push the inward bank further towards the river. When you add that with, I guess, the existing rejigging that needs to occur, that car park will in effect be, if it does end up there, will be a lot longer and a lot skinnier than is currently shown on the diagram. So that's just something to be aware of. That said, there is opportunity, should the decision be to locate the car park there, to work together on the road crossing, etc., because it's very likely both construction activities will be occurring at the same time. So there's some cooperation that could occur if that was the decision.
And just to follow on from that, so earlier on I asked some concerns around if that's going from 4 metres to 8 metres, then
that's width.
Oh, width. Okay.
But part of that is in response to climate change. It will be built with an opportunity to raise that stop bank down the track, but it's mainly around, I guess, having a greater structure to resist erosion in the event of a major flood.
And the last question I have for you is, given this is between the boom or the flood control system and the riverbank, and there are still a number of people that use that portion of the river recreationally, either for walking or their dogs or what have you, is there a expectation that public access from the car park to the river should still be enabled? So does that sort of mean we might have to tweak the security thing later on, or what's the expectations around access for public?
So I guess we haven't got to, so I guess all of our river areas are accessible to the public, and there's an expectation from the public that they can access that area. So we haven't had any in-depth discussion whether this would decrease or increase the opportunity for access to that area. It obviously displaces an area of green space that is currently utilised. The utilisation is probably pretty low at the moment. Yeah, so there's no real detailed discussion around that. The other thing I wanted to point out is the staff of the Regional Council have conveyed the view to our councillors from a technical perspective. This is knowingly putting 600 vehicles in a known hazard zone when there is an option to place those vehicles not in a hazard zone. And so if we think about the recent flooding we've had and the number of vehicles that were written off and damaged, that's something that's front of our mind from a technical perspective only. And there was reference to other similar car parks. There's one down in Wellington, and I've followed up with the Greater Wellington region, and they have in fact lost vehicles in that car park as well through the actions of flood. So we do have a flood forecasting system, and it is a robust and good flood forecasting system, but it's not an infallible flood forecasting system. So it works well when we have rain in the ranges and we can track the flow as it comes down the river, and we can give several hours notice. But we also have those highly intense events like we did the other week, which are more challenging to forecast. So although it's a mitigation, it's certainly not 100% effective.
Thank you. No further questions. Thank you, Chris.
Just elaborating on that, it wouldn't have mattered where you had your car parked in the event last week. If you're at McLean Park, perhaps you might have got flooded too.
Well, absolutely.
The safest place may have been over the stop bank.
Is there any other questions? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Chris. This may be slightly outside of your sort of area that you've been looking at, but is there a trigger for resource consent from HBRC as well, and has there been discussions with your team about that?
So normally the construction in a floodable area would require comment from our team. So we haven't, I guess, had any discussions with our consenting team on that. I'm also aware that we probably would need a cultural impact assessment, particularly for that area of the river and its proximity to other areas. And so I'm not sure if that process has been built into that consenting timeline either.
Through you, Mr. Chair, could I ask that question of the planning consultant for the applicant, whether or not they have furthered conversations with the Regional Council on structures within a flood control scheme requiring consent?
Yeah, look, do you want to go back up there? Cause just, sorry.
We'll bring your chair over.
Or sit down here. There you go. You can share my speaker.
Yeah, look, absolutely. All those technical experts are being engaged under our head planner. I'm only the project manager, so and obviously the Cultural and Heritage New Zealand are the two big ones that need time. So, you know, to answer that question, in terms of the constructability of the car park, we're not looking to spend too much money yet until we know where we're going. I mean, obviously there is definitely those aspects need to be, you know, drilled down into detail. And you mentioned the geotech for the car park and things like that, which, you know, we can work around and come up with the correct solution. Obviously the accuracy of the plans, Chris, we're not building up to the top of the stop bank, so I can assure you that we'll be set off the toe. So it's just all about managing how much money we spend till we get the right answer to go down. So does that answer your question in terms of, you know, how far we're going to go with the design side of things in terms of bringing HBRC into the design?
Yes, thank you. I'm just, of course, acutely aware that the RMA working days stop on the 20th of December and don't start again till the 10th of January. Your timeframes to me seem unrealistic for gaining consent and understanding that you don't know exactly where you're going yet, so you haven't done all your site work, obviously. So I'm just building that into forming up my my thoughts. Happy to have comment.
We're ambitious.
Absolutely.
But we have to think big.
I understand.
And we're doing our best to get it all wrapped up, like I said, by the 16th to get it into NCC.
Thank you.
I guess if we get to a position where we're looking pretty close, our mayor will be able to battle a bit of an extension for us, perhaps. That was a statement, not a question.
Mr. Chair.
Is there any other questions?
I can go after Rachel if you like.
Yeah, thank you. Just a comment on the timeframes. We would have to engage quite a significant pre-app process for this. I think possibly 2 weeks will be unrealistic for us to be able to achieve all the pre-app meetings that we will need with multiple parties to start the consent process. So just noting that challenge.
Mr. Chair.
Obviously there's a big job to be done, but the attitude is how can we do it, not how can we stop it.
Yeah.
Is my view on it. It's a pretty important facility we're looking at for the whole of the region.
Mr. Chair. So support those comments. Absolutely we want to see this go forward, especially in light of Centennial Hall losing its capacity at the moment. 2 remaining questions. One, can this be built in stages? So can we build the arena and then address the car park as we're able to build, or does that all fit within the one consent? That shows my lack of understanding of that process. And the second question is, I understood that there was some Napier City infrastructure running through the centre of that reserve, particularly one of our large water mains. Is that an issue? What are our thoughts from our infrastructure team?
Through the chair, I'm actually not aware of the location of the pipeline and whether that would be impacted by this, but I can go away and find that out for you.
I briefly spoke to John Kingsford about it, and he said it was a remedy could be found for the issues. I think there's the chlorination unit in there, is there?
I know there's a rather large and significant main running through there. And with regards to building in stages, is that all based on consent process and what's in the consent, or can they do that in stages while we do some of these concerning matters around the car park?
Through you, Mr. Chair. From my brief conversation with Paul O'Shaughnessy this morning, that the resource consent does need to include provision for suitable car parking. The district plan includes a provision of per metre of space you need a certain number of car parks, so it does need to be, I believe, consented or submitted all at the same time.
So the necessary reports and assessments need to be in place before the consent is provided. Is that what I heard? Is that the layman's interpretation?
My response was that it can't be separated. You can't, get a consent for the building and then worry about the car parks at a later date. It needs to be part and parcel all at the same time.
And so sorry, Mr. Chair, through you. And so the consent does require those assessments.
Yes, I believe so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Just another, it's got nothing to do with that at all, but just looking at the plan, I am part of the Indoor Courts Committee, and we met a month or more ago, and there was quite a compelling presentation made by somebody from EIT about the importance of having play opportunities, playground equipment close to the entrance and exit of the proposed plan we have, so that it's not just a box, basically, that people are inside, that there's the indoor-outdoor flow or whatever. There's opportunities for younger children to be out there playing with their parents, supervising, that are quite close, and I don't see that opportunity reflected in the plan that I've got in front of me.
No. Through you, Mr. Chair, as Rodney was sort of alluding to before, this decision as to where the car parking goes is really critical, and it's the next step in the process where a whole lot of other jigsaw pieces will fall into place after it. I do have a proposal and a plan to basically kick in as soon as we've got the we know where the car parking is, to develop a spatial and connectivity plan for the area. So looking at the whole damn thing and how the bits all fit together, and making sure that we are trying to tie it together as not just a standalone great big facility, but actually ties in everything else around it. But that is really conditional on once we know where the car parking is going to go.
Any other questions? Right, I'd like to put a motion forward. It's the officer's recommendation, but changing C to approve the stop back option as a preferred option, and then C would become D and D would become E. Did you get that, Sheree? No. So, Councillor Taylor, second that.
Bring it up on the screen.
Yeah, can we just put it up? Thanks. We'll put the option up.
On this here.
So I'll just open up on that, in that it's I think Napier's got to take a lead to give the regional council a direction where we want to go, and that's what I sort of got out of the meeting yesterday at the regional council. Some of the things that that concern me if we don't go with the Riverside is the future proofing, which we've always been conscious of future proofing. That as PGA have indicated, they do want to build on and get bigger as the growth goes with indoor sport, and that we would be digging up a car park if we grew, which does not make logic to me. I think the spirit with the EIT and their clear direction today is that they want the car park on a riverbank, and they outlined their reasons, as you all heard, stay closer. We've also heard Craig's view of how the car parking would work, and he's gone over the future proofing and shown plans of it. Chris has mentioned the flooding. It was given, it was in Chris's presentation that there hasn't been a flood there for 25 years. After I've said this, there'll probably be one tomorrow, but it is a difficult one with the way flooding's going. I wouldn't have picked that my house would have got flooded out last week either. As I said, Napier's to take the lead. It's in the spirit. It is a shovel-ready program, so we do have to move on it. I've spoken to Stuart Nash about it, and their view is if we don't use it, it goes. So that is a pressure that's been put on by, I guess Craig said that it was not quite shovel-ready, but we've got a shovel-ready project there. So I clearly think that we need to take the option of the stock bank. We do have the double debate system, which will come back on the 17th, and give a clear direction, and the Regional Council would have met prior to that. So, seconder, do you want to?
Governance.
I'm happy to do that because I mean we don't need to consider it if we go with that option. Are you happy as the seconder for that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Remove B. And B becomes B.
Over the stop bank?
I think, well, do you want to put over the stop bank option? Just in case...
on top.
Just in case someone puts it on top. Mind you, I think Chris is trying to make enough room for us to put it up there.
Get a few cars up there.
Over.
Are you happy with that change?
Yep.
Yep. Do you want to speak?
Yeah, I do want to speak to it because I think there's been a number of points made and I don't want to labour on them, but I think they should be focused on. This is not a Napier issue. This is a regional issue. And we got to get past thinking that the facility at PGA is just ours. This provides an opportunity for the youth of Hawke's Bay, the whole region, and I think we should consider that and think about that very seriously. The option over the stop bank deals with a number of the issues that we are facing. Residents in Taradale for the last few years have been complaining around a number of cars that are parked in neighbouring streets. And as Dr. Collins has spoken about, that's what happens. We have to provide car parking for EIT as well as this facility that is in close proximity. We also need to consider that if any future development is shown by Craig, that's not going to go southern and over the stop bank. You're not going to put extra courts over the stop bank, but we may put them further down towards Taraha Reserve. So that is the only place that the car park can really go. And I want to just talk about future proofing. We have got a perfect example at Mitre 10 Park of where some planning was done and a car park was placed, and we've now got that ripped up so we can put a swimming pool there. So we need to think about the future. Where are the future courts going to go? They are not going to go over the stop bank. The only place for the car park is over the stop bank. And sure, there's a few little things that we have to get sorted out, but it's up to us to show strong direction to the Regional Council that that is the option that we support. Chris has talked about the flood. Now, he mentioned the system that they operate. There is at least a 2-hour warning of water coming down the river. We cannot plan for what happened on the 9th of November. That's a deluge in one place, but they can give plenty of warning of rain in the ranges that may come down and inundate that car park. And as Craig said, or Chris said, if the person is not at EIT on that day, yep, their car might get flooded. But all those that are there will have at least 2 hours to get out, get home, and save their own property. So I think it's time for us, as Keith said, Councillor Price said, show some direction, take some leadership, and show the Regional Council that that is our preferred option. Thank you.
Do I have any other comments? Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, through you, Mr Chair, I'd just like to speak in favour of the resolution and also speak about the flood risk. I'm intimately knowledgeable about the car park in Lower Hutt that operates for all-day parking and casual shopper parking and has a minimal risk. I think there are maybe 2 events a year where they need to close the car park or remove vehicles from the car park. There are ways of putting plans in place to mitigate that level of risk. It's a minimal risk. I attend the Sunday market there. That's every Sunday, but I haven't attended every Sunday, but I have been there before. I don't think the risk of the Taradale proposal is anywhere near the risk that exists in the Lower Hutt scenario. So I think, speaking in favour and endorsing the comments of Councillor Taylor, I think it's the perfect solution to solve future needs and also to provide the provision of parking off-street for the EIT students and other users of Pettigrew Green Arena. And it will give us the opportunity, when we have other exhibitions that are not sport-related at that facility, to adequately park vehicles off the street. So I speak in favour of the over-the-stop bank car park proposal.
Thank you. So I've got three speakers in favour. Is there anyone going to speak against it? Otherwise I'll be putting the motion. Right, so the motion up on the screen there, you've all read it and aware of it. So all of those in favour of that motion, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Right, we're going to get to item 2. Thanks everybody for the input and the presenters. Well done and thank you.
Well done, Councillor Price.
We can say whatever we
One better one.
Moustache.
Nodding yes too.
But this, fortunately.
Everybody try and find a reason why to...
Righto, item 2 is the report on Napier City Council drinking water supply implementation audit. And Catherine.
Hi. Good morning all. So the purpose of this report is to present the findings from the water supply implementation audit undertaken end of September by the Hawke's Bay District Health Board, drinking water assessors, which are our regulator. Following that audit, an audit report was compiled, and the findings from that report will be presented today. So just a bit of a background summary on how it works. So our water safety plan has been approved on 8th of November 2018 and is to be resubmitted for another adequacy assessment in 5 years or upon a major change, whatever comes first. Every year, drinking water assessors across New Zealand are undertaking regular implementation audits of the water safety plans on an annual basis. So this is an annual event. The objective of that implementation audit is to assess if the information provided in the water safety plan aligns with what we're doing in the field, if we are adhering to our internal policies, procedures, and systems we have in place. This year, drinking water assessor had focused on reviewing performance against the 6 principles of drinking water, which underpin the delivery of an effective, safe water supply. I am sure you are aware of those. I would just like to pinpoint out the 5th one, which is the suppliers must own the safety of drinking water. This is also one of the reasons why this report has come to this meeting. So going forward, we would like to provide more visibility to the council and to the public in regards to the water space. Drinking water assessors also wanted to capture what we've done so far, because as you might be aware, Tomara ROI will be taking over the regulatory space from 1st of July next year. And the outcomes from that audit usually fall within 3 categories: non-conformances, recommendations, and non-compliances. So for this year's audit, we had no non-compliances. So just to make it clear, non-compliance would be an event against the drinking water standards for New Zealand or against the Health Act. So as a fact, for the last 2 years, for 2018, 2019, and 2019-2020 compliance period, we have been fully compliant with the standards and the Health Act. There have been 3 recommendations raised, 1 non-conformance, yes, correct, 1 non-conformance and 1 observation. So recommendations are mostly overlapping with the observation and are talking about the suggesting lack of resources and lack of tools within the council. I would like to focus on the non-conformance, which has been raised. So it has been raised against our SOP that's linked to the water safety plan. It by itself, it is of operational nature. So basically, our system, our flow chart didn't work well on that occasion. To give you a little bit of background on the SOPs, so we have 7 SOPs in place to date, and if there is an event that triggers the SOP coming into the action, we record all measures taken in the response sheets, and from 2018 onwards, we had acted 67 times on those SOPs and provided records. On this occasion, for this SOP, the actions didn't get through. I guess you are wondering why this happened is, at this stage, we think that the system in place was not robust enough, but we have engaged an external consultant to undertake the internal audit on that non-compliance. And this is due, the report is due early next week, and the recommendations from that internal audit will be implemented by the 15th December as outlined in the Drinking Water Assessor Implementation Audit Report. So I'm happy to take questions.
Councillor Simpson.
Yes, perhaps you want to take Councillor Crystal's question first. Yeah.
Do you know what it is?
I don't.
Councillor Crystal.
On page 22, which is on recommendation 2 of the report, it states that, and you kind of skipped over that several SOPs relating to chlorine monitoring results, auditing of reservoir checks, trending of data, and triggers for complaints appear to be haphazard. There is a word of mouth in these types of tasks that have been undertaken, and it's fully appreciated they may be, but however, there's a lack of evidence relating to the process and resulting actions. To me, that's quite concerning, the word haphazard in there. and considering we have a lot of complaints about chlorine and things in our water. So can you just fill us in what they mean by that?
So a recommendation in the implementation audit is not legally binding for the Napier City Council. Of course, we would like to address all the recommendations that drinking water assessors have pointed out. In this particular case, it is about us not having all the tools available to make processes more automated and remove the human factor, human risks out of the procedure system. So to some extent, we have already addressed some of those risks, and we are procuring a software solution to make our compliance water monitoring very robust, and it's going to be automated. So this is coming on board early next year. Does this answer your question?
Answer your question?
Yeah, yeah.
Does? Are you ready?
Yeah, sorry, I just didn't want to stymie discussion because I just wanted to provide a bit of a summary to the outcomes here. Firstly, I wanted to identify the commendations. I think it's important that we recognise that we've received some very favourable comment from the assessor. I think the non-compliance, the assessor, I was present when the assessor made his presentation.
Do you think it might be quite a good idea that you move this when we get to it?
I'm more than happy to move it.
And speak on it. So we'll just cover if there's any other questions, and then you can move it. Mayor.
Through the chair, the observation has been made that there's potentially a common factor across all the recommendations and non-conformance being lack of human resources and tools. Is that due to a lack of funding, the inability to recruit, or a combination of both?
I'll ask Catherine
Through the
to
chair,
respond.
I'll take that one. I think it's a combination of a number of things. So we have some pretty antiquated systems that we're looking at changing. We haven't had a focus particularly on operations and maintenance historically, which we're picking up on now. So we've got our maintenance management transformation program, which is automating a lot of our inspection type work so that that is documented within a system and it's regular and it's it's automated rather than being paper based. We're moving towards a new asset management system, which will be a great help to us in this space as well. So I think we've got a number of process and tools issues that have been holding us up in the past that we're now resolving or on the path to resolving. And as Anzi said, we've got a new system coming on board next year, which will automate some of our monitoring as well, which will be great. Staff-wise, we've got 2 new roles in this current annual plan, and we're recruiting for those at the moment. We've also got funding from the reform money, and we will be getting another crew at the depot to assist us over the next 14 months. So we are hoping to spend over this next 14-month period with this additional resource time to address some of these issues, to look at the processes and practices, look at our systems, go out and collect data, and elevate our level of asset management and understanding and automation of process and make them more robust. So there is a combination of all of those elements that we need to bring in to assist us to get to the standard that we need to be at.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Tapani.
No, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, there are a number, but I think I'll take most of them offline and talk directly with the Three Waters team. But as was mentioned by Councillor Simpson, there are a number of notable comments worth expanding on, so I look forward to that kōrero. First question was, the statement was, we learnt some things from the Drinking Water Assessment and Implementation Report, and that we would like to make some things more visible. What does that mean?
So basically, the drinking water assessors are outlining the importance of the suppliers must own the safety of drinking water. So if something goes wrong with the drinking water supply, the bucket stops with the CEO. So we would like to provide more information in public forums such as this to you. and to the CEO to make informal decisions with your future planning. So that also means that the quarterly memos on the water supply will be now presented to the Sustainable Napier Committee going forward. So we started that half a year ago with direct emailing all the councillors and the CEO. And also all the compliance report coming from the drinking water assessors or any other major documents will be presented in these meetings.
Trying to find my question now. Have we got, I notice on page 25 of the agenda or page 8 of the implementation report, it speaks to the Audit and Risk Committee and some of the expressions made. There's actually quite a lot in here. Is there any chance that we'll be going through this in a workshop at all? Or
It'll be double debated.
Okay. I might come back at the second debate then and really articulate those questions because I've got quite a lot.
Right. Is there any other questions? So a mover for the officer's recommendations, Councillor Simpson. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Wright. I'll let you go now.
Okay. Through you, Mr. Chair, in moving the resolution. I was present when the water assessor orally presented his report to staff and management, and he was very positive in the way that our organisation has matured in its approach to water quality and management of the services. Very complimentary in the way that there is a continuous improvement process attached to each of these processes. And he was at pains to comment that the non-conformance issue was not a public safety or public risk issue. It was purely and simply an administrative issue that he felt needed to be addressed and commented, but at no point in time did the failure impact on the safety of the water or the network. His commentary is there around capacity to maintain and follow procedures as prescribed, and that is an issue that the staff obviously need to address as to how to overcome those shortcomings. Certainly the water assessor was very favourable of the way staff manage and also the way they were managing the chlorine system, bearing in mind that we have multiple entry points throughout the system, which does create vulnerability around volumes of chlorine in particular places related to flow. So he was very clear that we have good practices in place. He was very clear that we have competent staff managing a complicated process, and he was very complimentary of the way that the staff cooperated with him and his team in the review process. In relationship to the, what do they call it, Principle 5 or whatever it is, around ownership, he did articulate that he was concerned that the CEO and the head of the department was not present at the old presentation. I think that is somewhat overrated. Provided we have good internal communication systems and processes, as indicated, he's talking about that being an historical issue. I think going forward that's easily resolved around the ownership, and certainly this council's taken a very mature and more transparent ownership around the water quality issues within Napier. So I think we've got all those bases covered. So through you, Mr. Chair, I certainly move that motion.
Thank you. Councillor Wright? Councillor Taylor, did you want? No? Anyone else got any comments? Councillor Tapani?
No surprise.
No.
So I've got a question, but also just to reiterate the comments from Councillor Simpson. As I read through this report and the implementation report, to me it stood out the difference between our people's efforts and our policies and its ability to serve them. So clearly in the implementation report, our staff, especially the depot, were given some significant attention, the standard of their work, the quality of the inspections. But one item that did bring me, made me scratch my head, and that was around the chlorine implications and the importing, the storing. Are there, if we lose 1/3 of the effectiveness of the chlorine during its transit, what are we doing around, and if the option is to provide a storage facility at the depot, did I read this right so far? How are we mitigating those challenges?
Through the chair, and Anzi, you can correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is that we had some batches that were, the chlorine wasn't as effective as it should have been, and I think we've changed our supplier, is that correct? And some of our processes around handling?
Correct. So we are in the process of changing the supplier of sodium hypochlorite. So we will now eliminate that risk of hypo disintegrating during the transport from Australia to New Zealand. So we're now going for a New Zealand-made product. And we will be implementing additional quality assurance, quality control steps into that process to make sure that what we get at the yard is actually what's saying on the certificate.
And supplementary question, do we currently store that material from our previous supplier on the depot yard?
At the moment, yes, but the change to the new supplier is going to be made very soon.
So, and that change will mean we won't be storing at the yard?
We will be storing it at the yard, but it's going to be fresh product, so it's going to be fresh New Zealand-made product.
Thank you.
Any other questions before I put the motion? Okay, all those in favour of the recommendation, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item 3, Lease Reserve Pilinga o Matua Whānau Charitable Trust. Go ahead. Member here? Jenny here?
Anybody can give us some background to this?
I know Brian won't be here.
Can you do this one, Deb?
Good on you, Deb.
Oh, yeah. You're so good.
Good on you, Deb.
You got this.
Questions ready.
You beat me.
A lot of questions on this one.
I haven't got it that much.
Thank you.
Right, so I'm sure you've read the report and it's got a bit of history, this one. Fundamentally what happened was the building has been built on our land, and for a whole raft of reasons, there was some extensions to the church, and then the consent came in for this childcare centre, which apparently we thought was the church, and it's not actually the church, it's a completely independent operation and it's built on reserve land. So the purpose of this report, and I haven't got all the details that Brian would have had, but basically is to tidy up that issue and legitimise their occupation of that bit of reserve. Would you like any more detail than that?
No, we can.
Was that adequate?
That's adequate to open up questions if there's any. Councillor Crown.
Thank you through the chair. Deb, thanks for being so willing. I'm not sure if you can answer my question, but hoping so. So I'm just wondering what steps have we put in place to prevent this type of thing from perhaps happening again?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's a very good question. I mean, I've never heard of this ever happening in my time before. So our processes will be more robust, I think, than they were back in the day, as my children say. So I think I feel confident that this would not happen again, if that's sufficient.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Tapani.
I guess the first question is, do we have any councillors at the table who are familiar with this particular site and the conversation as it's evolved, or does it all sit with our consents team, our building team?
I know.
I just would love a better understanding of how we got to where we are.
Could I just, I don't know if I can answer that entire question, but I do recall it's the Congregational Christian Centre of Samoa, Church of Samoa on Riverbend Road. It's the old Michael's place, and the church was built on top of that, and it's not mentioned in this paper, but I know it was very controversial at the time because the new church, which is up and operating now, I'm not quite sure when it was built, but apparently it was built higher than the consent had allowed. And by the time that was discovered, it had been built and it's still there. So it is a rather messy situation with the ownership and the confusion, which was caused by us really in a way of not doing that site visit, which would have revealed this situation at an earlier date. So yes, it's quite a thriving little community with the pastor and his wife living on site and the pastor's wife running, or qualified early childhood teacher, and one of the people managing the early childhood centre and the church and rooms next door. But I don't know if that answered all your questions, but I do have a question myself, if I could just perhaps see if you could help. I think the rental is very reasonable for the amount of land that's available, and I understand that's all done according to a formula. I'm just a bit worried about the fence because I've seen that fence and it isn't safe and it's been there for a long time. It's an old corrugated iron fence that sort of tips over a bit. I'm just a bit worried, is it their responsibility to put a very fancy pool type fence there, or because we are leasing the land to them, is it our responsibility? And secondly, does anyone know how much it's going to cost, because it's quite a lengthy strip of land that will need to be re-fenced?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I could probably make some general comments there. The lease, and I haven't seen the detail of it, but is likely to pass the responsibility for the fence renewal onto the kindergarten, onto the leasee. They're generally responsible for those things. In terms of order of cost, it will be, without doing measurements, but we're probably talking somewhere between $3,000 and $5,000, I would think. It will be substantial. I recall reading somewhere in the report that the fence has been inspected. Now, it wasn't by me, and that they were satisfied that it was safe. But I'm just trying to think that I did read that and didn't make it up.
No, you don't. I read that.
Or maybe
I can help you there. I think it actually says that additional clauses have been included in the draft lease with regards to the fence, which would tend to suggest that perhaps an upgrade is required.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
Councillor Tapani.
Thank you, Max. So notwithstanding the rather convoluted history that brings us to this point, and the various points in which parties have perhaps not upheld their responsibilities, as I read this, the recommendation in front of Council is the best solution going forward to enable the change of title for this reserve. So it's a matter of, well, we can't change what's there and we need to find the best solution going forward, and that's what this recommendation is? Well, any changes to, I mean, I had concerns around the fact that it was built so close to our stormwater network that it got to a completed stage on a reserve, and we're all finding out about this after the fact, but those are all historical issues. So as I read this report, this is about the best option we've got before us in order to enable, one, a child care facility to continue to operate, and two, I guess, the use of what otherwise would be underutilised reserve land.
I think that's a fair assumption. We can't go backwards. We are where we are. The building is on council land. The access is subject to access across the church land, so that relationship has to be maintained for this to remain functioning as a childcare centre. The land is not utilised for any other recreational purpose, and we have a number of childcare facilities on reserve land, so that in itself is not unusual. Yeah, I think it's appropriate to tidy it up, but...
I think the fact we've got a paper here today is answering your question to a certain degree.
Yeah. All right.
Mayor.
Through the chair, and you may not be able to answer this, it might need to be a an action to take away. But my concern is that it's been identified that the childcare centre is landlocked and they are reliant essentially on the goodwill and the relationship that they have with the church in order to access the centre. And we've stated that that's not a council matter, it's for those two parties to negotiate. But I'm wanting to know whether there has been any discussions to date and there is a level of confidence that this isn't going to be an issue. And I would also like to think that council would assist to facilitate those conversations if that was required.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not aware that there have been discussions. I suspect, given the length of time that has been operating from that location with that informal access arrangement, that it is quite good. I think perhaps the next step is to try and legitimise that access through the church. That would be the obvious thing to me. But those discussions, and officers would be happy to facilitate that. It's in our best interest.
Yeah, thank you.
So maybe these are some points that can be covered for the main council meeting. Yeah, we could put those down as a file note. Any other questions?
Just one other, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. It's an odd little piece of land, isn't it, sort of sticking out as a reserve? I mean, do we have little pockets of land like this around the city, or is this quite unique?
No, we've got plenty of weird pieces of land, which you'll be pleased to know about. Some of them not as stable as we thought they were.
Okay, do I have a mover for this recommendation? Councillor Simpson, Councillor Mawson, do you want to speak on that?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy that there's been reasonable discussion and I think a clear direction set.
I think the fact they've built it a bit higher is forward thinking. In light of
they know that we do.
Always looking on the bright side, Councillor Price.
Does anyone else have any comments, please? Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Right, James, project update.
Good morning. This is a information-only paper, so I'll, rather than go through the line-by-line item of each project and its progress, I'll suggest we push through to questions and accept that the paper is read. Is that possible?
Yes.
Okay. I'll do my best. Being 46 projects, I don't know the finer details of everything, but I'll do my best to answer your questions.
Okay, obviously everyone's read the paper, so do we have any questions, Councillor Tapani? I'm going to kink in my
Nice, easy question, I hope, James.
Yep.
So this is a really great step in the right direction, I think. When it comes to reporting back to council, are we likely to see our reports in the format that's in the minutes here with the colour coding and the projects listed in that way, or will there be a more concise dashboard in time?
So going forward, the level and the quality of information will improve. Naturally, this is what I'd consider a first blush, and it's early days yet. As Kath alluded to earlier, our systems and processes are in a process of being improved as well, and our maturity towards project management as a profession is as well. So yes, in the short term.
Oh, no further questions, and I'm happy to foreshadow moving.
Any other questions? Right, so the recommendations moved by Councillor Tapani. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Wright. Do you want to speak on that?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
No, thank you.
Ask a short question, if that's right. I think at the last meeting there were a number of requests for additional things to go on, and a couple of them are there and a couple of them aren't. So I'm just wondering if they intend to be added.
Sorry.
That's right, through the chair. Yes, we had several projects last time that aren't included in that report, and there's various reasons for that. Just they're not the stage that they're going into our cycle process, or it's not a capital project. So I had a list of a few projects that we needed to come back to you on. So one of them was the trade waste bylaw. So that project has now kicked off, and we're likely to go to consultation in May of 2021. We had a request for information on the Pandora pipeline, and we'll be talking to you about that later on today. Chlorine-free review was on there. So to give you a bit of an update on the chlorine-free review, we had the final report that came through to me on Tuesday. I haven't opened it yet because I haven't been anywhere at my desk to have a look at it, but we've had the final report in, and the final spreadsheets should be in. So the next step from here is we review that as a team, and the peer reviewer, GHD, also review the report and the financials. We'll probably have a little bit of toing and froing once we've done that review. When that report is then completed, we need to talk with our finance team very nicely, they're very busy at the moment, to help us look at what the impact on rates would be with the two options. And I'm currently booking in seminar time with you guys early next year to present the report, and we'll bring the reviewer with us so that we can talk through the outputs of the report and get your feedback and any questions, and to determine the way forward from a consultation perspective to come back to our community. What else did we have? You asked queries around planting around drains. So I've got a little bit of summary here, but I'm sure Deb can jump in if she wants to. But we planted 6,800 plants at the headway of the Taipo stream near Maggie's Way. We've done some foreshore planting with Rotary on the Esplanade and Bayview West Shore. We've been gifted some funds from an unnamed benefactor, and using that as part of Stage 1 and Stage 2 of the Rotary Pathway Trust, and that's $100,000. And we've got Napier Boys High have been planting sections of the Cowshed Drain in conjunction with some of our work, and that's generally the work that's been happening to date. And if you need any more info on that, we always provide that. What else did we have? There was a request to talk about the Lagoon Farm wetland. So as we've discussed recently, we're looking to match some of the funding that Regional Council have put in for the regional park, and then for the wetland side of things, we're looking at what storage we might require within Lagoon Farm itself, and as part of our consenting, we need to look at what treatment options we'll need to go ahead with. So we do have funds in the LTP, which hopefully will get signed off, and then we've got a number of projects that will look at investigation to what we actually need that final solution for that stormwater treatment element to be. So that was, I think, all of the additional projects that you had questions on. Were there any other projects that you needed an update on?
Thank you, Kath. Very well prepared.
I'll take that on the chin there, because I should have let her go. She didn't kick me.
Supplementary question, please, Mr. Chair. When you say we've planted trees, who's we? Was it a community-based initiative, or was it just our staff?
They're a mixed bag, which is probably no consolation at all. Sometimes we had contractors do it, sometimes we had community members do it, and sometimes our team have done it. So we've got our bases.
Covering all your bases. All right, kappa.
Councillor Taylor.
Yes, just a question through you, Chair, which may go through Kath to our parks area, but I understand that a large number of the plantings on Maggie's Way were destroyed with mud inundation as a result of the floods. Can that be confirmed, and what resolution is? Because I understand that was a bit of the Rotary planting system.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, we about 200 plants of a total of 6,500 sort of fell off. Rescued by our team were 50 of those, so we're sort of about 150 down, which is probably not too bad. So we will replant those when we do the second stage of Maggie's Way. A bit late to replant now, and we've updated the Pathways Trust accordingly.
Thank you.
Right. Any other questions? So you're still happy to move that up? You moved it, didn't you?
Indeed.
And seconded by Councillor Wright. So any comments? Councillor Tapani?
No comments, Mr.
No comments? No? Any other comments? So all those in favour of the officer's recommendation, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item 5, the annual environmental report submission to HBC, discharge stormwater to Ahuriri Estuary, West Shore tidal gates, and we've got Cameron. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr Chair, councillors. The following papers seek that Council note the submission of the appended 3 reports to the Regional Council as the regulator, and these are as self-assessments of the level of compliance of 3 resource consents that NCC hold. As the maturity of our environmental knowledge of the city grows, the presentation of these reports intends to build integrity, openness and transparency of the work that NCC are doing and the level of compliance of these resource consent assessments. They are big documents, so I appreciate your time in skimming through them if you've been able to. Really, the purpose of these reports is just to note that it has been submitted. This first one, item 5, relates to the jointly held consent with the Regional Council and Napier City Council to discharge rainwater drainage water through the West Shore tidal gates on both sides of the expressway as you head towards the airport. This is the water which carries dust, dirt, spills and natural and man-made contaminants from a catchment that covers the southern side of Napier Hill to Miani and EIT to Parklands. It's a big area of land. It does not include the Taipo stream, and it does not include discharges from the Pandora or Central Business District. The Environmental Solutions team of Napier City Council do all the monitoring and measurement of this consent currently, and it is an expired resource consent. A consent application to renew this consent has been awaiting processing by HBRC, and that's now been returned for final confirmation by both applicants. And this new consent includes volunteered stringent consent conditions for both the councils to adhere to for the increased betterment of the water quality in Te Whanganui a Orutu, the Ahuriri Estuary. The issues noted in this first report are that we have a large quantity of zinc being discharged via the West Shore tidal gates in our waters from the city. Zinc and copper have been found at high concentrations in the water samples during wet weather monitoring events. And nitrogen and phosphorus concentrations are also high during wet weather and dry weather monitoring. These are a self-assessment of our level of compliance, and then the Regional Council come back with a legal assessment of their feelings around those. And other than that, it's a summary of what I can provide you for that first one for item 5.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Cam, for the presentation of the report. I would just like to note and congratulate your team. I think there's been a huge amount of work done in this last financial year on this report. And I continue to be impressed with your level of commitment to environmental improvement in this space. My question is around the annual compliance reporting that we do receive back. What sort of time frame are we usually seeing for the compliance grading, and have we been fully compliant in the previous year?
Through you, Mr. Chair, previous year, I believe it was full compliance. I'd have to double check on that. I believe that was the case for the first time in Napier's history, actually. What was the second question, sorry?
So that was answer to the second. So the first question was around when we expect to see those compliance gradings come through.
It can be anywhere between 3 and 10 months.
From now?
From the submission of the report, which was the 30th of June.
Thank you.
Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Cam, I think you've actually answered my question. It's a jointly held consent.
Correct.
Between us and the Regional Council. The Regional Council administers some of the open drain environment. Yes. But is it that we alone do the reporting, or do they contribute to the annual report?
No, to date, Napier City Council has been the sole reporter, monitorer, and been doing the work in relation to this resource consent to date.
Thank you.
Councillor Tapani.
You didn't even look, did you? First of all, just to reiterate the Deputy Mayor's comments, Cam, you still continue to lead in an excellent way, and just commend you for that. My question is around the variations to consent, given that this is something we've been hoping. Well, there have been a number of times where yourself and HBRC have pointed out that the testing to a minimum standard doesn't really inform us all that well. So with the variations or the change to consent are both our environmental team, which is sitting at that table with you, and HBRC, are you happy with the changes in the variation to consent, and that we'll have a better standard of reporting, a better understanding of our environment going forward? What's your feeling on that, or your assessment?
Mr. Chair, absolutely. So we have volunteered very stringent conditions in this new consent. It's a brand new consent, looks nothing like the old consent. You wouldn't even know it was from the same city. It requires a huge amount of reporting. What the shortfalls of the current expired consent were was that it was very, very prescriptive about the time that you did the monitoring. After a prescribed amount of rainfall for a prescribed amount of hours, looking at a prescribed number of contaminants. Some of those contaminants we weren't finding a lot of information about, and we were missing a whole lot of information about the greater picture and the greater good. It also didn't involve the community a lot, or tangata whenua groups, for instance, and we have really bolstered the need to report back to the likes of the Ahuriri Estuary Protection Society and our mana whenua partners, and involve them and empower them in the actual monitoring as well as the recording and the results that we're finding. It's a hugely different concept which has never really been done before here.
Awesome. Sounds really exciting. Thank you.
Any other questions? Do I have a mover for the officer's recommendation? Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Tapani. Would you like to comment?
Just to echo the thoughts that have already been said around your drive and commitment from yourself and the team for pushing for positive outcomes, and we really appreciate that you're raising the bar. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Tapani, any comments?
No, I'll remain silent at this point.
Thank you. Any other comments? All those in favour of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item 6. This is your life, Cameron.
Item 6. It seems a bit that way, doesn't it? Item 6, the report of the submission to Regional Council in relation to the discharge of wastewater into Hawke Bay via the Awatoto submarine pipeline. Again, quite a significant report, a lot of time spent out there monitoring this, and particularly the additional monitoring that's taken place in relation to the leaks that have been found due to inspections that we have required. The issues identified in this report are a high level of total suspended solids being discharged, and monitoring would suggest that the high concentrations are originating from the Awatoto industries, because they come in on a separate line which we can monitor separately. With that in mind, we have increased compliance monitoring within that area to try and address what we've found within this annual report. The other issues identified are the 2 leaks in the outfall. We have also stepped over the line the compliance limits for BOD and TSS on occasions. Some of those occasions have been relating to significant rainfall events, which relates to inflow and infiltration, because the calculations that are done are based on the quantity discharged, not necessarily the levels of concentrations in the samples, although there is linkage there. Zinc and ammonia, as with the stormwater discharges, in the wastewater we're finding a lot of zinc as well. We have looked at all sorts of different parts of the network to try and ascertain why there have been increased levels of zinc at particular times. Very, very difficult to try and trace back a single source, which we have not been able to do. And since it went over the compliance limit, it has not gone over that level since, without rhyme nor reason. We are reviewing the trade waste bylaw, as Kath previously mentioned, and we've set a fairly audacious goal of going to public consultation for that in May 2021. That time will come around very, very quickly, but that will bring the trade waste bylaw, which is a number of years old now, up to speed with the ongoing maturity of what we're finding, in line with the recently reviewed stormwater bylaw. So that will provide us with the guidance and powers to act upon those who discharge to the trade waste lines, and subsequently cause us to potentially breach our resource consent conditions held with the Regional Council.
Any questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a really tricky space. I know you're often wading in amongst all of those chemicals and zinc deposits in our waterways.
Not in the wastewater system, though.
Oh, well. I've seen the photos in those bright orange jackets. So my question is, we already know that there are some people discharging into our network that we're unaware of. Will the pending changes provide you with, this really leads to a carrot and stick question, will the pending changes provide you with a framework to be able to engage with our stakeholders in a way that brings about the desired change? So the bylaw, for example, is the stick approach, set a standard and stick to it. What are we doing around the carrot approach? How are we formulating that relationship with industries of concern? Mr. Chair, the industries of concern we're in touch with basically weekly, if not more frequently. We have developed conversation with them over the last year, which has never been the case, and that is providing a much better understanding of their operations and how we can enable them to comply. It will also enable us to gain an understanding of what the trade waste requirements need to be in relation to each individual operation, because each operation of the ones that we do know and we do have as clients of the trade waste network have very different operations to the next one. They know their processes better than we will ever know them, but we know the implications upon our trade waste network from the results we're finding. So that's the key balance there. The increase in the trade waste bylaw will also, the review of that will also publicise that better. It's not something that people within the community think about as a day-to-day. And it will probably, well, the intention is that it will get people to think about the implications of what is being put down the pipes. And it will also reduce the bar slightly, so it's not just massive discharges of quantity that we will be looking at. It will be smaller operations that are discharging poor quality trade waste as well. So, yeah, there's a whole philosophy around it for that continual improvement of what we're trying to create within the environment of Napier. Subsequent question. So these changes will help us to better identify, so you're talking about the relationship between NCC and our industry discharges. So a part of that will be determining the volumes of their discharge with more accuracy?
Correct. Currently, there's quite an archaic calculation that's carried out utilising the flow meters on their council-supplied water supply, which is not an effective way of measuring the quantity that's physically discharged.
Right. And my final question, I hope, is I know that there's an issue around with one particular business where HBRC were participating in a discharge consent process for that business, and there is a portion of that business which discharges into our stormwater network, and that Napier City wasn't a part of that conversation, and we're sort of picking up the pieces afterwards. How are we addressing that loophole?
Through Mr. Chair, that's a separate issue that's not relating to trade waste. That's a stormwater issue. However, we are currently reviewing sample results from that, and where there's a breach, we will be following our enforcement procedures to work out whether that is in the public best interest to carry out enforcement action.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Do I have a mover for this? Councillor Crystal, seconded Councillor Mawson. Any comments?
I'd just like to say, Cam, it's great to see. Environment's very important to all of us, and it's really great to see the bar being raised in this area. I know we've talked a lot about our wastewater over our last year of council, and it's really important to us to get this into a much better space, so thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for all the work, Cam, you and your team. Excellent, thank you.
Any other comments? All those in favour of the recommendation, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Cam, item 7.
Item 7, again, just noting that submission of a report relating to the discharge of stormwater from the Thames and Tyne waterways in the Pandora industrial area into the Ahuriri estuary has been submitted to Regional Council. Issues raised within our report to Regional Council are that there continue to be pollution events within this network. The most recent one was during lockdown, where the entire Tyne waterway turned a bright blue colour. We investigated that, but unfortunately, after many hours searching, we were unable to establish where that had exactly come from. There was no fish kill in that particular incident, but it's just a reminder that these things happen due to human interaction, and this is the reason why we've updated the stormwater bylaw so that we can carry out enforcement action by people who are dumping huge quantities of whatever the substance might be into the waterways. Following the recently established enforcement processes, we are following up on the pollution events that are mentioned in this report, and subsequent to the new stormwater bylaw coming into force in February this year, we already have enforcement action well underway in relation to officers coming across a pollution incident in March. Only a month after we managed to get that across the board. So that is the first prosecution that Napier City Council, as far as I'm aware, the first prosecution that Napier City Council has ever carried out under the stormwater bylaw. So that's interesting territory to be forging as well. With issues regarding the quality of the water, again, zinc shows up in both waterways here. We know within Napier there is a large quantity of naturally occurring zinc within the sediments and waterways, but there are also human-caused sources of zinc as well, which we continue to work with. After rainfall, there are increased microbiological levels. This is the E. coli, enterococci, for example. They come through those waterways in quite elevated levels. Some of that is washing through the sediment as it breaks down over time. Some of it will be coming from other sources. that we continue to monitor through our wet weather monitoring regimes. What hasn't been well known within the Thames and Tyne waterways are the sediment quality, and there's been anecdotal evidence that suggests that we shouldn't remediate those waterways because we might extract contaminants from below the surface of the sediment that have not been released to the estuary and are as such encapsulated within those waterways. In the last couple of weeks we have taken core samples down to about 1.8 metres, and those are being sent away for X-ray analysis, and that will show us exactly what levels we're dealing with and whether there is a benefit in remediating these through excavation or encapsulation perhaps. So that's some pretty exciting science that's come through as part of this report. The benthic ecology results in this area were very similar to last year, so we don't want to call a trend on that at this stage, but it's good that there's not been a massive die-off of shellfish through some of these pollution events that we've been seeing.
Do we have any questions?
Yes, thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Source tracing, what can we do about that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we are already doing a lot of source tracing, so we do spatial sampling within those waterways. Every 50 metres we've got pegs, and we can work out whether there's a large increase on one contaminant at one position where it's not at the next. We have been out there taking GPS points on every pipe that enters every waterway in the city. We have now completed all waterways except the Taipo stream, so we know exactly where every pipe that leads to a waterway in Napier now comes from, which has never been done before either. So within those 50-metre segments, we now know on what side of the creek there are discharges coming from each individual position. In relation to the Thames Tyne in particular, we have carried out an operation where we walked up there in dry weather. There was a discharge that was clearly not rainfall, and we have blocked the pipes, and that very quickly makes people realise that something's going wrong on their site, because it floods back up the pipes where it shouldn't be flooding and creates knowledge of something that's wrong, and they address that very promptly.
My last question, and it's not directly related to the paper, but by extension, I note that you've got the new bylaw coming up, you've got some new consenting standards coming up. I was also aware of how busy you were prior to these changes. Will you be the only resource that we'll be employing in this space going forward? Or
through Mr. Chair, there's already the scientists as part of the team. So we've got 3 scientists in the team, an intern, and I've just this week managed to secure a coordinator for the team to look through the entire work stream and allocate tasks and enable the logistics and the administration of what we do, and the recording of the results to be structured. So that that means the scientists can do the science and we can continue to forge forward with these initiatives. And we've had an intern for a year now who has been hugely valuable in developing and delivering the GPS outfall, the direct outfall data, as well as a lot of the monitoring, the scheduled monitoring that we do with observations throughout the waterways each week. We're okay for now.
Any other questions? Do I have a mover for the officer's recommendation? Deputy Mayor Brosnan, seconded by Councillor Wright. Any comment?
No.
No? All those in favour of the recommendation, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. So I was intending to go through to the end of my open agenda, Is there any, before we have a break, is there anyone that can't do it? Yeah, yeah.
Let's go.
I was getting a lot of signals from Councillor Brown, but obviously I didn't obey them. So we'll carry on. Item 8, Taradale Bridge Club.
Sorry, folks, got me again. First now. Through you, Mr. Chair. Taradale Bridge Club, just an update on their project really. You'll recall them coming initially to the public forum and then a report to encourage them to, with enthusiasm, pursue a joint arrangement at the Park Island Northern Sports Hub where we are trying to get Napier Pirates based there and any other groups that we can, which is the site kind of diagonally opposite where the rugby union are. Now the Bridge Club, bless them, have done exactly as we requested and have met with a whole range of user groups, but unfortunately I just don't think we're going to get that over the line. It's about fitness for purpose and compatibility of user groups really on that Northern Sports Hub site. Now we have identified that site specifically in the master plan for Napier Pirates and they have made some really solid progress in the last 12 months. I've had a number of discussions with them, largely triggered by the discussions with the Bridge Club. So they've now got some preliminary plans together and they've had some discussions with Sport Hawke's Bay, which I'm following up on next week. The Bridge Club have looked at a number of other sites, but where they've landed is next to Central Football at Park Island. Now, there's a couple of fishhooks with this. It was never identified in the Park Island Master Plan as a site that was to be suitable for additional buildings on the basis that we were pursuing a hub-type arrangement. So it requires a discretionary consent through the district plan, which is not a showstopper at all. It just needs to go through that process. For my worth, it's a good site for their building, and that is, in summary, where the report has got to. The Bridge Club are very keen to pursue this. So, yeah, so that's where we've got to.
Any questions? Councillor Taylor.
Just a question there in relation to the original master plan. Was Central Football designated in the original master plan?
They are in the 2017 one, and there's been some discussions about whether they might move with the development of the Blue Water Stadium site and Napier City Rovers and the addition of a field on the back of that. But to my knowledge, those discussions have not progressed to any point where they're going to be sued at this stage.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No, do I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Taylor, seconded Councillor Wright.
Yes, I'd like to speak to support this motion. As Deborah has said, the Bridge Club has come to us some time ago and put their case, and they have worked very diligently to meet the questions that we asked at that time. They have tried amalgamating, that didn't work. They have tried a number of venues that have all had fishhooks, and they have come up with this option at Park Island adjacent to Central Football. For once, we have a community organisation who have come to us with solving a problem and not asking for money, and I think they should be congratulated for that. I think the compatibility issue is the thing that we should focus on, and having a Bridge Club and a rugby club together is not compatible. Bridge have their tables out, they like to leave them out, and you know, they should be working alongside other organisations who would use that facility in the format that is being suggested. And you know, they have worked with the country music, they've talked to bowls. I am sure, should we give them the green light to go ahead and do this work, and get this place built, then there will be other community organisations that are compatible with them that will move to that and share that facility with them. So I support it wholeheartedly, and I think they should be congratulated on the work that they've done, the money that they've raised, and we should now support them moving forward.
Councillor Wright.
I don't think I can really add to Councillor Taylor's comments except to add my congratulations to the club for their hard work, and hopefully we'll have the resolution that you require today.
Councillor Crystal.
I'd just like to add, as the third Te Aroha councillor to speak, that totally can congratulate them, and I think this is a really good option, and they've worked really, really hard to get to this. So they just want somewhere to go and play bridge.
Thank you. So we've had 3 positive. Does anyone want to speak against it? They'd be a brave person, I'd say. I don't know who's sitting behind me, but I think there might be a couple that I know, so I'm very nervously sitting with my back to them. So all of those in favour of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Right, item 9. Rotary Club Ahuriri 50 anniversary project, Spriggs Park. Are you going to try and outdo Cameron?
Not with quite as much science, unfortunately.
Okay.
But this is a really good project, and you'll see the next item is about another Rotary Club project. We've been approached by the Ahuriri Rotary Club, and they want to do a development at Spriggs Park as a commemorative thing. Barbecue, shade sails, picnic tables. It's a great option. They are going to take the bull by the horns and engage with their community out there. It's consistent with our policy drivers, albeit our management plan is slightly dated. This is completely consistent with that. So we've had a good look at it. We're really keen to give them the necessary good to go so that they can crack on with their project. The barbecues we have on Marine Parade are immensely popular, all the time, really busy, great thing. So that's it in a nutshell. We've been working with them for a number of years, which seems ridiculous given the scale of the project, but sometimes these community projects take a little while to formulate and get to the right point where they're ready to go.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Brown.
Thank you. More probably of a procedural question. I see that they're looking for funding at some point. Would that funding be decided in a separate discussion at LTP time? Is that when that would be?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there's no funding currently allocated for this project. If they wanted funding from the project, and I'm looking to Adele and she's not here, but I imagine you would be able to discuss and make a resolution accordingly if you wanted to make a contribution, but there would have to be some determination about where that funding might come from.
That would be separate to what we're doing today.
Perfect.
Any other questions? Yes, Councillor McGrath.
Yes, just a couple of questions. Have the depot team had any involvement or aware of this going on?
We haven't liaised specifically with them about it, but we will when we come to the finer details. We understand the requirements in terms of the operating issue. The barbecues on Marine Parade take a bit of cleaning, keeping up to spec. There's a few technical issues around the fat drip trays and things that we would work through with them. So, yeah, short answer, no, but yes, we will.
And that kind of follows on to it, because I think there was a plan to start using standardised barbecues, so if we do have faults, we can switch them in and out. So that's all part of the plan?
Yep.
Awesome.
Any other questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
It's not in your ward. You carry on.
No, it's not in my ward. I have some reservations with this paper. I'm conscious of the fact, I guess the first question, I've got a series of questions, but the first question probably would resolve the latter questions, and that's around timing. When do the Rotary Club and the benefactors of Spriggs Park see that this might happen as a deliverable activity?
So the Rotary Club are really keen to crack on with it, but we would not let them do anything over the summer period. And there are a few work-ons to get the details sorted out, to get the barbecue specifications, to get a few bits and pieces in a row. So they are very keen to keep it moving, but there's also community engagement, which this will be the first phase of, that needs to follow through. So I don't know whether that answers your question or not.
It does, and it sort of highlights the fact that there's some thinking in there. So my concerns are that there's already an ongoing conversation around this location with Mana Ahuriri and their pending settlement. So this going before the Māori Committee is pretty essential, but also a conversation with Mana Ahuriri would be prudent. I think to progress anything in this space without being cognizant of their legislative pathway and some of the outcomes of their settlement might put us in between a really honourable project with great feel-good factor, but historical residual issues for mana whenua. And so I'm just highlighting for me, as I read this, there are some concerns there.
So this will go through the Maori Consultative Fund, through the Maori Committee?
Sorry, through the chair, just a question of you, Councillor Tapani. I don't understand, this is reserve council land. It would be good for myself and others who don't understand what the connection is with the Mana Ahuriri settlement.
Is the Spriggs Park the same place as the Tikaraka Valley that was mentioned to us prior around the settlement outcomes?
No, this is Spriggs Park where the playground is.
So there are two Spriggs Parks?
No. I think where you're referring to is more Perfume Point on the other side of the East Pier establishment. And it was with regards to naming, a change of name, as opposed to it being part of the settlement claim.
Yes, it was about a name change and recognising that history prior to Spriggs. And it's that connection from the mana whenua point of view that I don't want us to just sort of boldly walk into without making sure we check a few things. So if I'm wrong, that's great. That puts us in a fantastic position. But I'm just highlighting from where I sit, my interpretation
in
is...
listening to you, Councillor Tapani, I wonder if it's Sturms Gully you're thinking of.
That's the one.
Not
Thank
Spriggs
you.
Park.
Thank you.
Right, we'll carry on. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Brosnan. They both begin with S, do they?
They do.
Any other questions? Any other questions?
As the word sarcastic does.
Okay. Do I have a mover for this? Councillor McGrath, seconded by Councillor Brown. I was waiting for you to put your hand up. Any comments?
Yes, I'm in full support of this. This is great for our families. And when I first came on council many years ago, now it seems, I asked questions of why do we have no seats, tables, chairs and barbecues along our foreshore, both Marine Parade and Harding Road, and we're slowly getting there, and I think this will go a very long way to helping.
Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I concur with Councillor McGrath's comments. Just also that this is in line with work that the Ahuriri Business Association are doing and other community groups in this space. So it'll be cool to see more development for families to enjoy in this space.
Councillor Crystal.
I would just like to say on behalf of the Spriggs family that my grandfather would endorse this. He was very much about children and doing the best for what's best for kids in Napier. So I think that's a great asset to his park.
Thank you. So I've had three in favour. Does anyone want to speak?
Can I provide a reply?
No.
Yes, you do, if you want to.
Because no one's spoken against it.
They're just not for children, the seats.
Actually, all I wanted to do was actually thank the Rotary Club and the Parks team for putting this together for our families.
Richard.
Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. And item 10, you've got this one too, Debs.
Thank you, Mr Chair. We've got a similar project from the Taradale Rotary Club wanting to do some improvements in the form of shade, no Barbies in this situation, shade and picnic tables and seats along the Puketapu frontage of Taradale Park. We've had a really good look at it. Taradale Park's got a lot going on, but that means it's a very busy park and there's a lot of people using it, so the need for these kinds of things becomes heightened, I suppose. Particularly in that area, we're getting increased numbers of cyclists, and a stopping point for those and with some shade and picnic tables is a really good idea, as well as the cricket and all the other bits and pieces that go on there. So in much the same way as we've been working with the Ahuriri Rotary Club, we've also been working with Taradale, and they have landed on the project that's in front of you now, which is a 60th anniversary for them.
Questions? Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, thanks, Deborah. And, you know, I don't have a problem with the project. I don't know whether it's my eyesight, but I can't see where the cycle racks are in the... and the you're talking about the cycles, and obviously Taradale is the hub of Hawke's Bay cycling. There's no doubt about that. And cyclists are very, very particular about not being too far from their bike when they have a cup of coffee or a sit down at the table. So I'd just like that to be taken into consideration in my retirement. Thank you.
It'd be inappropriate for me to comment on eyesight, but
I can't see them either.
But we will include some cycle racks in an appropriate location and make sure they are visible for the cyclists when they're having their rest break.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Councillor Wright.
You don't think you can talk them into a barbecue for Taradale?
You could approve that in principle and we could have a discussion.
I'd be happy to.
I would think that would be a great advancement in that area.
Any other questions? Do I have a mover, please? Councillor Taylor, seconded Councillor Crown. Any comments?
Oh, well, anything that's going to increase Taradale's enjoyment and the residents, and for those others who pass through the best suburb in Napier, where they can stop off for a break on their cycle way, is great. So I fully endorse it, and thank you for your work with the Taradale Rotary Club. I just think one comment I'd make is that this seems to be a smaller project for 60 years than the Ahuriri one for 50 years. So I just hope Taradale Rotary, you know, pick up the ball and run with it, and a barbecue is included in the future.
Councillor Crown.
Thank you. Following on from Councillor Taylor's very thinly veiled challenges to the other Rotary clubs of the city, I just want to commend the Rotary clubs for basically giving the city and its people a birthday gift on their behalf. It's or an anniversary gift. It's an amazing thing to do in the spirit of community. So I definitely want to commend that. And I think it's also a really great example of having a good working relationship with council, and in particular your team, Deb, to see what we can achieve when our community come to us and both sides are willing. So yeah, more than happy to support this.
Any other comments? I guess you want to make sure there's trike racks as well.
I'd just like to say, as a user of the park during cricket season, it would be very nice to have some seats down there. And for those grandparents that come down, I understand Taradale's got a few, this will be an ideal opportunity for them to have something to sit on now, which they haven't had in the past. So bring it on. Not all one-dimensional here, Keith.
Okay, we've had 3 speak in favour, so all of those in favour of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. So I'll now ask for a mover to... Do you want to speak first?
What are you moving?
I'm just going to adjourn mine.
Adjourn, or are you moving public?
No, adjourn. Okay, just to move it to adjourn this meeting. Councillor Taylor, second Councillor Wright. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. We'll then hand